My name is Morten Reitoft from INKISH TV, and I have actually for some time been following a very exciting gentleman, Ray, who is, I wouldn't say that he is bashing the office segment of the digital printing industry, but he's doing some really good analysis of what they do right and wrong, and he is not afraid of saying his opinion about this. Is that an accurate introduction of you, Ray?
Hey, thanks. It's great talking with you. You know, the series is called The End of the Day with Ray. I started it about 4 years ago. Actually, I'm in my 5th season now. I just started that. Mm-hmm. But it's really just a venue to talk about the realities of a marketplace. And my focus is really on the business print side. It's dealers selling business print to the SMB space. And you know, it doesn't matter where in the world that is. It's pretty much the same deliverable. And obviously, there's a whole lot of dysfunction around that deliverable today as people become more digitized.
One thing is that people get more digitized, but it's also, I think that the COVID basically kept a lot of people out of the offices, so the need for office equipment basically disappeared overnight, right?
Well, I mean, I think the fantasies around managed print services and the value of print to the SMB space have been fantasies for a long, long time by an industry. The thing that COVID did was gave the end users the awareness and gave the end users something different to think about. Because if you think about it, no matter where you are in the world, the people that sell business print, they all do the same thing. They overspec A3 equipment. Most of these people could probably have been using A4s for the last decade. They put people in 5-year leases that they prematurely upgrade. There's a lot of dysfunction with that, but everybody told them the same story, and it was a business model. COVID came and the customers weren't using their machines. They sent their workers home, and a lot of the digital processes were already in place. People were already using Zoom, they just used it more. Yeah. And so, all these capabilities that people were kind of using just came to light that, hey, we don't need to be printing. What the hell do we need to print for? We could do it this way, or we can move information in this digital landscape this way.
And that was also kind of funny because when you mentioned, for example, that HP has been holding on to that, I mean, when people sent home, they should have printers too. I mean, it doesn't really add up to anything. I mean, the people that do photo prints at home, they have the printers and it's not really office equipment, right?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of HP. I think HP is extremely delusional. Most of their revenue's coming from notebooks. Notebooks are 100% a commodity product with absolutely no aftermarket. There's no supply, there's no real service to them. And, HP relied on print for a long, long time. That's their blood of their business, their profit. But, this whole nonsense about subscription prints in people's houses and all this crazy. I mean, if you think about it, HP has the largest market share of printers in people's houses before COVID. People weren't putting Ricoh printers in their house or Sharp printers in their house. They were buying HPs from Office Depot or wherever their flavor was. And all of a sudden COVID came. If all these people were printing at home, you would have saw those numbers in HP's supply numbers increasing, but they've been flat for like the last 5 years. So, the concern for HP is when they lose this annuity called toner and ink, they really don't have anything left. And selling a bunch of commodity items without any kind of supply is going to be critical, which will push back into their, production, print place where you live. So, it's kind of, I believe it's just a house of cards. It's just,
but I agree with you. And I was just thinking that, basically, it's the same with, I mean, we've been focusing a lot on the trade shows, and basically I think that a lot of people like to have the face-to-face and the people-to-people kind of communications like you did with the Curacera event. But when the day is over, everything has changed, not so much because of the COVID, but people have just started to realize. So trade shows is one thing, maybe office print is another thing, maybe there's a whole shit of other things that will basically change how we perceive and how we see the need for certain kind of services, like office print, for example. Before we continue on this conversation, Ray, I was just, because I said to you before we turned on the recording, I was a little bit curious because what I like about your daily shows, and as I said to you, I don't see every of them, but I see a lot of them. Are you an old, angry person that is just bashing the entire industry, or or how do you see yourself in that perspective?
Well, sometimes the best coach you might have had in Little League or wherever could have been perceived to be the meanest person you ever knew. But it's all just, I mean, we have enough people in our industry telling people what they want to hear to make them feel good, and I say this a lot, but it's the truth. We have a lot of outdated so-called consultants that have been telling these dealers the same old horse shit for the last 15 years, and they haven't really changed their talk tracks. And if you listen to them, we're still having meetings about managed print services. I mean, if we don't know how to do managed print services, a 50-year-old industry, we should know how to do everything there is to do with print. We shouldn't need to learn anything more about it. But if that's what we're trying to, share with our dealer friends, that, hey, you got to learn this to be better at delivering print. No, you need to learn why people aren't printing. And you need to pay attention to the conversations that might be the harder conversations, because those are the conversations that disrupt your status quo business model. So, and let's be honest, I do this for a living, and you have to get people to come. So I try to have a type of entertainment value to it, and that could be the old guy in the den wearing the sports coat could be part of that whole thing. But I am really a nice guy.
Yeah, we have never met, but I believe you. And as I said to you earlier, I really want to meet you in person when we have the opportunity. I was just thinking, the reason why I was asking is because basically I think that sometimes the messages maybe get more across when you have a kind of a very direct way of saying things. And is that also what you experience? I mean, I take that you from time to time get feedback from the vendors and from the dealers and from your audience, right?
Well, I try not to worry about offending people about a way I might say something. Now, obviously, sometimes I can get a little bit abrupt, and when I'm talking about HP, they're a $50 billion company. I could care less. I mean, those senior leaders, they should be able to have some criticism. I mean, Eureka can go on Jim Cramer's show and be treated like he's some kind of a king and the world's going to be great for HP. But at the end of the day, that's not really what I'm trying to get across. I want people to think about things that nobody else is talking about. And, good, bad, or ugly, out of those 700 videos, I don't talk about things that I don't honestly believe are real threats. I mean, you might not agree with it. You might hate what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, I don't make shit up. I'm not, I'm trying to use the real numbers. I'm trying to use the real facts that are presented. I just have a way to present them that might offend some people, if you will, or might make some people mad. But, that's just the way it is, I guess.
But I take also that when I look at how you present things with your sharp interactive board, I mean, basically you have prepared your thing with.
There you go.
With I do the commercial for you here, so that's great. But I mean, basically you have prepared by substantiating your opinion, by finding facts that support your claim. So it's not just out of the blue, of course, right?
Yeah, no, and if people want to argue the facts or argue my perception of the facts, I welcome that. But I'd love for HP to come on and talk about how they believe they're relevant, how they believe that the majority of the revenue and the fastest growing segment they have in their whole business is a notebook, and how that's going to save them in the future when print falls off a cliff even more than it is. I mean, that would be a great conversation to have. But, most of the industry or the outsiders, they look at HP, they think about the compute side. They don't really pay attention to the print side. If they did pay attention to the print side, they'd probably be asking them a hell of a lot more tough questions.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because as I said to you in the beginning, I come from the other side. I come from the print side, with the professional side, and actually wrote an article yesterday, because I don't know if you know that, but for the professional printing, HP just changed a little bit of kind of strategy. So they have formed what they call industrial print, that takes basically the Indigos, the page whites, the Cytex printers, all the more professional supplies under one hood, managed by a guy called Chaim Levitt. And the reason why I mention this is just because you say that when you refer to that the notebooks may save HP on the printing side, I think you refer mainly to the office print side, right?
Yeah, I mean, industrial print, there's, industrial print and then high-end professional print, your world. I believe that's displacement growth. I believe the OEMs are completely delusional about what's going on in that space. I mean, we used to have Heidelberg presses running roll-fed paper, doing millions and millions of impressions. I think about little State Farm cards that people used to carry in their wallet. Now all those are digital. Those used to be run on a multi-million-dollar Heidelberg press. I knew the guy that used to do it. So, as all this stuff has gone away and more is consumed in that digital landscape, it allowed for industrial print and high-end production print to really get into the digital space. And the OEMs are fighting so aggressively in that space. They're bastardizing the market to a degree, and they're lowering the cost of this equipment cheap enough that these print shops that are left, they'll just gobble that stuff up. But the one thing that none of you all can get back is the volume. We're not going to print that much anymore. So even direct mail, direct mail will be so rifle focused. Go ahead.
But it's kind of funny. It's just funny because I did some analysis because I was writing a blog post for a company called Hunkler who do the finishing equipment for these direct mails. And basically, direct mail, in particular in America, is one of the fastest growing segments right now with I think it's almost 2.7% annual growth. And I mean, you can say that's not a lot, but if you look at the number of pages, it's quite a lot. If you look at book print, it is growing. It's getting back from digital books to physical books. So in some segments, it is actually growing. And another thing that is really interesting when you look at the printing industry in broad terms is that if you look at textile print, printed electronics, some of the things that was not normally considered a printed product today is really is part of that growth. So I think that some of the people in my side, as you referred to, is actually quite confident that we have a strong growth potential because print is changing. I think that the people that are not changing, as you say, what did you say? About the constant that you always end your terms with is basically that a lot of the printing companies that actually thrive and do grow are the ones that actually have the ability to let's move on to the new things, right?
Well, I would question the growth in the digital or the physical mail that's printed in the production space. Against what number? 2 years of a global pandemic when nobody's doing anything.
Yeah, of course
or is it more relative? But where I will say the growth is, but it's very interesting because it changes who can sell it or deliver it. But the real growth is industrial. It's printing on tiles before they're fired. It's printing on wood. It's printing on, the walls in houses with, what do you call it? The wide format that goes on that we've seen them on the YouTube. Yeah. So, but, industrial printing on fabrics and all that stuff, absolutely. The way we changed with what we can print with ink, but that's not really the world where the guys that were selling production machines to the mail rooms, where we were doing hundreds of millions of impressions. Those days are done. And, you're going to have niches and where you can have, but I would definitely like to know where you're getting growth numbers of direct mail over what period, because in my mail, I don't get any, hardly at all, where before you got a lot. Now, I will tell you that what is printed is, the lists are so much better. And because we have this, phenomenal capability of understanding what buyers' personas are and what they really want, I mean, the ability to market to people is phenomenal. But it's even more phenomenal in the digital space. When I drive by a Walgreens and if I'm on Facebook and it tells me what's on sale, go to Walgreens because it knows I'm there. So, a lot of people don't like that stuff, but I believe that the winner in all of this is going to be whoever can advertise to me stuff I care about. Yeah. If you can advertise stuff that I really care about and it's welcomed, that's a home run.
I totally agree with you. And I was, when I read
the digital world is where that.
So when I read the articles about the growth in the digital segment of print, I was actually surprised myself. But I found actually quite some numbers. I will send that to you afterwards, just so you can see where I got the numbers.
Yeah, send me that. I would love to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Sure.
you're totally right. I can't remember whether it was over. I mean, of course, everything goes different if you compare to a faulty period of time. The thing is that, when you have closed a lot of print shops and you see growth with the print shops that are left, regardless of whether the total volume is increasing or not increasing, still plays a role, because basically you need to keep developing cost on new technology. You still need to sell also the high volume equipment for the remaining part of the market. And I can tell you also that I'm quite confident that in the book market, just to give you an example of what I find really interesting, is that if you look at books of one, basically it does not really apply to the bestsellers. It does not really apply to the normal kind of book that you see today. But the backlogs of books that you want to see, and if you look at Amazon printing books on demand when you order them, it is just a different business, but it is still print on paper, right? So I'm just saying that and the reason why I'm saying
Well,
this is not.
I think the threat. Well, I think the threat
We have a
to
slight delay here. I
professional
can hear that. Yeah.
production print. Oh yeah, but the threat to the production print is the OEMs losing all the money from the business print that supports the production print. And how does that change? Because they're going to lose the money. We're going to have a major consolidation. You look at Konica's lost $300 million in the last 2 years. I mean, how much more can they lose before somebody has to make some serious changes over there? Or, you're going to start seeing some, the yen is another great example. It's at its, 35-year weakest point it's ever been. Even the euro. So there's so many dynamics taking place for an industry, and if you just look at the business print, that affect the whole industry. I mean, do you really think Konica would be able to do R&D and sell roll-fed inkjet production and industrial print equipment if they didn't have their business print?
No, and
Or
that's
if their
funny.
business print fell off a cliff? No, not at all.
And and that's funny when you mention this, because when I saw your analysis on the Konica Menards in particular, I couldn't help think about, when I look at my side again of the industry, Konica Menards is also almost invisible when it comes to the production print. So they don't have the office print and they don't have the production print. So what is left, and maybe, and that is one of the things that you always wonder about when you are, as an editor, when I write articles, is always, okay, who will be the losers? Konica Menards is one. Xerox is maybe seriously one too, right? Of course, they will survive as brands and be acquired by somebody, but it's a market that needs to consolidate, right?
Well, I think, I always say that Xerox, I don't even consider them an OEM. Xerox makes some high-end gear in your space, but everything else they sell somebody else makes. They're the largest dealer in the world. They have the largest footprint to bring a product, supply the product, and service the product at end user level. No one's bigger. That's why, the merger with HP made sense to me. It would allow HP to dump all the commodity products they have into the SMB space with a value-added reseller that understands the end user, where HP doesn't understand end users. They want to wholesale stuff through distribution. That's why they struggled in that dealer space all those years. But, there has to be consolidation, but the scary part is they're not doing it. And so I think the ones that have the most money, you look at Kyocera as a great example, they're very profitable. I'm thinking, why do they need to merge with anybody? Maybe the strategy is to let some just go away. I mean, that does happen. Panasonic walked away. Remember that? And then they just walked away again with their scanners. So, does Konica Minolta decide one day just to walk away? Who cares? They have a nice industrial business where they sell that lens business they have is a very, very profitable business. Their healthcare business is kind of fallen off a cliff. Their print business, their IT business, it is what it is. But there has to be a consolidation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be driven by the OEMs.
No.
Consolidation will be delivered by the end users that stop buying the products or stop using them near like they used to, which we already see them doing.
Ray, one thing I can't help think about: who is Ray? Where do you live, and what drives you as a person?
Well, I'm sitting here on my porch in Peoria, Illinois. That's my tree behind me there. You just happened to catch me outside. But, I started in this industry like over 30 years ago. Schlepped copiers up and down the street, and had a fun time, selling directly to end users. That's back when people didn't have machines. You could walk in and sell them something. What would I do with that? Or sell the dock feeder for the very first time, or a sorter finisher for the very first time. It was always in that business print space. And when I got out of that business, I helped a friend of mine in Nashville, transition a company from print to IT. Through that 2-year period, I realized that's really the future of SMB service providers. Is to be much broader, but you have to go way upstream. You can't, you got to go after those high-end customers. And, that's really my motive today. My motive today is to get the dealers to realize that you can't continue to have business processes that were built in the 1980s that we haven't changed hardly at all, deliver higher end, broader services into the marketplace like IT or managed security or, managed marketing or anything you want to do around a managed deliverable. And if they don't do that, they're just, and here's the reality. I believe a lot of folks in our space, they don't care. They don't care what Ray says because they're just going to milk the cow till there's no more milk, which is a business strategy. We're seeing, some acquisitions in our space, and probably the same in Europe, but, those aren't home runs. People aren't out there selling, their stock. They're selling their assets for the most part. There's no, blue sky being offered to people. And so, how much of that will happen over the next 2 years? Probably a lot. Our industry is old. Most of our proprietors are in their 60s, almost 70 years old. We're in second, third generations. Those organizations with those second and third generations are apt to go more into the security services and IT services. We see that in the United States anyway. But that, that's an expensive transition. You can't just do that. You have to have a business plan and a platform to go do that. But
the reason why I'm asking is because I was just thinking that if you look at all the OEMs supplying office equipment as an example, or print equipment as an example. If you have the right management, communication will never die, and actually communication as a term grows right now. So you may be in a situation where basically it's whether you can capture that digitalization process and turn it into something else. Some of the films I've seen with you also talking about that the SMBs basically take ownership of their own future by actually being more picky on what kind of services and what kind of OEMs they work with, right?
Well, I think that the print OEMs are really irrelevant to a dealer, in my opinion. They're all going to do the same thing. You might pick one that turns out to dump their assets and be out of business. You might pick one that becomes the acquirer of somebody else that gets out of the business. Who knows where that's going to lead? But the real strategy is, what can you do in that SMB's office? And I talked about that today. We looked at the home office. We didn't look at the remote worker. And if we would have studied the remote worker and how they manage and manipulate documents in a digital landscape, we wouldn't have been focusing on putting some printer in someone's house that costs sub $200 that we're going to put a DCA tool on and supply toner because if they run out, it'll be a crisis. It was a total fantasy, and we were chasing pennies. Yep. When the real software companies and technology companies were saying, no, we need to focus on this worker, and how is this worker going to navigate information in a digital landscape? How are they going to retrieve it? How are they going to, ship it around, however they want to ship it around? And who's going to keep it secure and safe? We think security is about the security on the printer. That's like that's not security. No, that's security on a printer. So until we're ready to move upstream, but it's discipline. And we've been, our industry, the bottom line is it was a great industry. People made a lot of money. You sold a piece of equipment, you supplied and serviced that piece of equipment, and it was always a good thing. The problem is that the annuity that we get for the service and the supply is in the toilet, and it keeps getting lower and lower and lower, and at the same time, the end users are printing less and less, so it's a recipe for disaster. What industry, think about this, this defines the total disruption of our industry and dysfunction of it as well. What industry? We're in the biggest supply chain crisis in our industry's history, along with every other industry. And we're the only industry having sales. We're the only industry that are giving loaners to people so they can get we give them a used machine to replace a used machine until their new machine comes in because we can't get it. And at the same time, we're lowering their cost to service them so we can get the deal. And I did a satire that the businesses in our communities wish we all sold cars, because then they wouldn't have to pay 40% over list price. They wouldn't have to pay double what a used car cost them.
That's
but
true.
you know, how in the world is, think about this, and this is all over the globe, how is our industry not looking at this and saying, God, we're nuts. We're out there having sales when we don't even have equipment.
But
that defines dysfunction. That defines desperation. We're desperate because that's all we have to sell because we haven't transitioned.
But I agree with you.
Pretty
but
scary.
It's pretty scary actually. But I was just thinking that I mean, it's really rare that you have like companies. I mean, it happens, but it's really rare that you have companies that just live on a knowledge of the downwards, and then they don't do anything, and then they just die, right? Most companies at some point wake up and realize that they need to change, right? Or you think that is like totally different from this industry?
Well, I don't. I think that all industries collapse if they're supposed to collapse.
Okay.
You know, I think what's funny is I did a satire one time and I talked about Kodak's a great example. If you put the executives from our industry at a meeting and during the break somebody brought up Kodak, they would all talk about how stupid Kodak was. Yeah. Oh yeah, they just didn't see it coming, blah, blah, blah. And or Blockbuster, whatever, pick your flavor. And they'll tell you all the things that were going on and why they didn't pay attention. But at the same time, they're all doing the exact same thing, but they don't recognize it. Or they don't want to recognize it, or quite honestly, is there anything they could do about it?
No.
So if we know that business print and pages it's just going away. We're never gonna print more tomorrow than we did today. That's never gonna happen. No, so no matter what we do especially in the business world, no matter what we do in print, no matter whose territory we take over, no matter whose customers we take over, everything we get is always going to be declining. We have no more option to grow our business at serial number level, which is a problem. So we got to get more revenue out of those accounts.
So basically that is when you talk about that the services that we provide around the contracts we have with the companies that uses the services needs to change into digital services, needs to change into something that is value adding. That's what you talk about, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think if people just focused on why people aren't printing and took it serious, why are you not printing that? Totally understand why they're not printing that, and then figure out how to deliver them that without them printing it better than the other person. So whether that's a better software, whether that's a better application, you know, we're still trying to give someone a better experience through us. That's what we do as resellers. But we have to define the fact that nobody cares about our print relationship. They don't care. They care about an experience, and they'll trade in a relationship for a better experience every single day of the week.
Ray, in your studio, when you do the end of the day with Ray, you have a pile of books. I mean, is that books that you read, or is it just something that is on display?
Well, I will say that some of those books I've read a long time ago. I mean, I'm 61 years old, so, you know, I probably could. I forgot some of the stuff. But, you know, it's just a collection of stuff that I've read, and, you know, some of those have, you know, long since left my brain, and some of them are still there.
The reason why I'm asking is basically because, you know, one of my sons is 17 years old, and he always say to me that I prefer to read books and content on paper rather than on the screen. And I was just wondering, is everything just a dead end, or is it also something that we mentally have to make a decision whether we want to have everything fast? I can give you an example. I spoke to a person who owns a media, and he was bashing me for writing long emails. And I was just like, it's kind of interesting that an editor of a magazine doesn't really like long emails. I mean, they don't have to be too long, of course, but
no, too long to read. Too long to read.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm saying this is
that
because
is a reality.
Because I saw at least in America, because I think that's actually one of the big differences between America and Europe is that there is a tendency and maybe I'm biased, but in Europe there's a tendency to maybe dig a little bit deeper and sometimes read a little bit more. And I saw a film yesterday from Xerox where they were promoting a school system in the US where the teacher that was doing photocopying in the school, she was really happy because the OCR scanning, but then also because it was able to make a summary of what it was on the paper she copied. So the students didn't have to read the full story, but just the summary. I mean, we can take the path of history, we can take the path of what technology offers us, but we can also from time to time say that no, we don't want to take that path because it's wrong. Have you ever considered that?
Well, I think that if you think about, I go back to Carnegie when he built all the libraries. He was the very first Google in my world. He was the guy that gave information. He gave information to common people, easy for them to get. So all the lay people in the world could go to the library and they could read about anything. It was all in the library. But when you went to the library, you went to the card catalog and you found out the specific thing you wanted to read, you would go to the shelf and get it and read it. Today, we consume more information on the quest to find out what we're looking for than when we finally find what we're looking for. And there's power in that. I think today, if you think about it, if I Google Konica as an example, I could have all kinds of information that comes to me. Now I could pick whatever gets my attention and I can read that. But I think as an old guy at 61 that grew up reading a book with a focus on what I'm in front of me is a lot different than people that grow up today. I mean, when I'm watching my 4.5-year-old niece navigate through a laptop or whatever she's playing with, it's amazing. So I think that, communication has changed, but more importantly, the way people consume communication has changed. And I don't think it's ever changing back. The ability to go on a quest for information, be presented all this other information that you could filter or not, and some people want to filter it more for you. But at the end of the day, the digital world is powerful. I think if you're 10 years old today, you've consumed more information than someone that was 80 took till they were probably 40.
Yeah, but the reason
there's so much of it out there.
The reason I'm asking is because you're probably familiar with Chris Anderson and the long tail and Free the Future of Radical Price. And the reason why I was they got to mind was basically because if you look at Chris Anderson once wrote that you can find all the information in Wired online. The thing and the difference is basically that when you look at Wired magazine, basically somebody has made a choice of relevance. And that is basically what you're talking about here, is basically that you can find anything you want on the internet if you can find it. But if you can't find it, that kind of Reader's Digest is not too bad actually. Maybe there's a renaissance for Reader's Digest, right? Who knows? In an electronic version at least, right?
Well, I mean, when you're in your 60s, you grew up in a whole different world. Your brain was geared differently. When you look at the people that are 30 or 40 today, they grew up with technology that we couldn't even have imagined when we were young. And so their minds are different. I mean, how do you could sit next to some millennials working together, and by the way, millennials are 40 years old now. But you look at some of these millennials as they're sitting there, or the generation underneath them, and they're right next to each other, texting each other. That's how they communicate. They're on Slack talking to each other, and they could just talk to each other. And they're talking to each other with abbreviations, and they're talking to each other while they're working. And they, their minds think a lot different than ours because their minds grew up different than ours. But I don't think that there's a reality that one day everybody's going to have a book. Now, if there's a nuclear holocaust, I guess, but it won't matter because we won't be able to print the books.
So in your brain, 61 years old, how old are you?
61.
Yeah, but how old are you in
my
your brain?
Yeah. I try to stay. I try to stay relevant. I think my brain's still 61 years old. I can't do anything about that. But I try to make sure I nourish it with relevance, if you will. So, you can nourish your brain with 61-year-old thoughts, or you can nourish your brain with thoughts of a 20-year-old. I try to look at what the younger generation. We can learn so much from the younger generation, and I think we dismiss them. I think we think they don't work as hard as we did. I always joke that the baby boomers built some phenomenal technology, and the millennials are teaching them how to use it. There's a difference. We always had really nice technologies. We just thought we had to work really hard to accomplish things, and they're teaching us we don't have to work that hard to accomplish things if we use the technology.
Ray, do you like red wine?
I love red wine, actually. All kinds of red wine, especially from the Hunter Valley in Australia.
Fantastic. Okay, so what I will basically say, because there is a slight delay, I'm sitting in a hotel in Frankfurt, and you fall in and out. So what I would like is basically you and me to meet at some time in person. I will buy an Australian red wine that you just mentioned, and then we will sit and have a chat, and I think that could be wonderful, because it's already been very, very enjoyable to meet you here on this virtual kind of event, regardless of whether we are old-fashioned or young in our brains. I'm 54, just so for comparison, but I appreciate your time here, so thank you very much, Ray.
It was great. It was great talking with you. I look forward to that in-person meeting. And let's do this again, too. I'll have you on the end of the day with Ray.